Good day to you, and welcome to the Micro Muse episode 2. I am sorry I'm a little bit late. I suddenly realized I had not set up my camera or any of those things, but I'm here now. Yay! And today I wanted to talk a little bit about something that is just I just think it's super important because I think something really odd happens when we sit down to write something important, like a book or an essay or even a social media post that feels kind of, important. And it's like our bodies and minds are taken over by the ghost of, boring person with a big old stick up their butt quite often, or the ghost of our primary school selves, or the ghost of our, great granny who had fixed ideas about what grammar rules should be. And we get really worried that, the teacher or, whoever is out there is going to take the ideas that our imaginations made and squash them into a boring little cube that fits the system. And so instead of writing something real, we end up writing something correct, or we try to. And what comes out is cold and sterile, if anything comes out at all. And we turn to things like templates or AI generative writing, or kind of stale prompts that we're seeing all over the place on LinkedIn and basically everywhere else at the moment. And we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to write something big and clever, or to go viral, which is something that we have no control over whatsoever. And we feel pressure to compete with like that influencer whose most inane posts get liked and shared and reshared thousands of times, the thought terminating cliches. And we think that's the most important thing. And I get it. I totally get it because, in a world that is increasingly difficult to market ourselves, especially when we're small, it's like we've got to get eyeballs on everything at all costs. And we look at what other people are doing and it's like, well, that person over there just got like 1,000 comments in the first half hour, which, by the way, is not really organic reach, but, less said about that. And you look at what they've written and it is often, sometimes it's profound. I'm not saying that all the time it's not profound, but often it's just it really is inane drivel, and anyone could have said it, and it doesn't really mean anything. It's so vague as to be totally meaningless, and like I say, it's a thought terminating cliche. It just is designed to stop the brain from thinking, which I think is why it's so popular. But like, what if that wasn't what we were aiming for? What if instead we try and say something real that's actually going to move somebody to feel something or do something? And I think that's a lot more important, because like we bust a gut to come up with the unique idea that nobody else has ever thought of in the entire history of the world, which is probably not going to happen because there's very little new in the world and creativity is putting things together and seeing what happens. But we feel all this pressure to do that and to create this great idea that's going to like go viral or whatever, and we forget about the little pieces of humanity that make up the days of our lives. And we forget that all of the big things, the massive things, like the rocket launches and the civil rights movements and the huge sweeping changes, they all start with tiny things, like really small everyday things. And they usually start with people who are invisible and behind the scenes. And they're not the ones who are celebrated. And we dismiss, we forget those little pieces of humanity. We forget the human that we're writing for, and we forget the connection that we're trying to make, and we forget the moments that we dismiss as unimportant, even though they've lodged themselves in our brains. Like, I remember tiny things from years ago, usually things that wake me up at 4 a.m. in a cold sweat, like the time I said really loudly, why don't you just open up your legs and stuff it all in? And if you want to know what I mean by that, then maybe sometime you should come see my stand-up comedy. But yeah, we forget about those little moments, the ones that feel unimportant at the time, but actually they're not. And we forget to write about the conversations that make us laugh and the chance meeting that lit up our day, or like the woman that I met on the train who had just come back from India, from a vacation in India, visiting her family, and she'd been in Germany for 1.5 days because her flight got diverted when Heathrow was on fire. And we had such a great chat about the fact that she's getting married next year and the wedding's going to cost 80 grand, and because Indian weddings are quite the event. And it was just like that lit up my train journey. And I'm not a person who normally chats on the train. I like to keep to myself, but she needed help with her bags, and so I helped her with her bags, and I made a little connection. And so, we forget to write about those things, the things that make us laugh, the absolute rage induced by poor hand dryer placement on the wall that blows drips down your sleeve. That kind of thing makes a connection because there's going to be somebody else out there who will read my rage fired piece on hand dryers and be like, yeah, God, that is really stupid. Why did they design it like that? Why did they design it like that? Either the person was not short or was not neurodivergent or was, a tall dude. I don't know. But yeah, we don't talk about, we forget, we don't think to talk about that poo that wouldn't flush on a first date. Because a lot of us have been there. And it's just like, or the story that made us cry. The story that made us cry that we want to share. All these experiences are personal and they're also universal. And they connect you to that random reader on LinkedIn, or the person in the bookshop who picks up your books, or the person who's doom scrolling YouTube and happens to stumble across your ramblings about important tiny moments. And they are magic. They're magical. They connect us to other humans. And that is ultimately what writing is all about. And so today, I, as the Micro Muse, would like to suggest this. Pick a tiny moment from your day, yesterday or today, because there's been half a day already, and write about it. Not necessarily for anybody. You can just write it for yourself. But I would also like to suggest this. Pick up a pen and a postcard or a piece of paper and write a little note. Write a little like note to somebody that you care about or love or admire. Somebody whose address you've got, preferably. Write it, even if it's about nothing much. Tell them your little story. Tell them how great you think they are. Tell them, I remembered this story and I thought it might make you smile or laugh or cry or whatever. Or I thought it might move you in some way. Tell them how great you think they are. Put a stamp on it and send it. And you will pull them away from the cares of the world for just a moment and you will make them smile because you know that they know that you're thinking of them. And you will have written something that has changed the world, because that is how the world changes. We change the world with these tiny little moments. We don't have to change the world by shifting entire social movements all at once. If you can make a difference in somebody else's world just with a small gesture like a letter or a postcard, isn't that really fucking magical? I think it is. So yeah, do that. I'm going to leave you with that today. Your 2-minute takeaway is that writing something important doesn't always mean a book or an essay or a viral LinkedIn post. It just means writing your humanity onto the page. So set a timer for 5 minutes and write a little note to someone you love or like or admire, and then put a stamp on it and then send it to them. And get into the habit of writing something important every day, even if it's something absolutely tiny. And if you want to know more about this kind of thing and how you can turn something tiny into something bigger and important, then I would like to invite you to join me in Microbook Magic Season 7, which kicks off on April the 28th. And I'm going to put the link and all the details in this post below, but do DM me if this is something that you think, you know what, I have got something important to say and I do want to put it in a book. DM me. Ask me if you think Microbook Magic might be for you and we'll have a chat and we'll decide. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Micro Muse. I will be back same time next week. Peace out.